Welcome, everyone. I'll go ahead and let you sit down in your seats. I'm Erin Holmes, the director of the School of Family Life, and I'm very happy to give this warm welcome to all of you. I also want to give a special welcome to the family and friends of Virginia Cutler and all those who were instrumental in setting up the endowment for the Cutler Lecture. I'm also grateful to the family and special friends of Dr. Mikaela Dufur who are joining us via Zoom. And I want to welcome our dean, Dr. Laura Padilla-Walker. Thank you for being with us. And also welcome to the rest of you who are, I'm assuming, part of the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences. I've only been here for 15 years. And those of you who are visiting to listen to Dr. Dufur's address today. I'd like to turn the time over to Kathleen Reyes, who will give our invocation. Kathleen is the administrative coordinator for the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences. So Kathleen?
Amado Padre Celestial, gracias por este día y gracias por la oportunidad de nosotros poder estar aquí juntos. Pedimos agradecimiento por esta oportunidad en que doctora Mikaela Dufur tiene para poder presentar acerca del tema que vamos a aprender. Pedimos en este tiempo agradecimiento por la oportunidad de tener este edificio en esta universidad y también que podamos, por favor, tener nuestros oídos abiertos y pensar claramente acerca de la información que vamos a recibir en este tiempo y que podamos, por favor, usar esta información y ponerla en práctica y que sea utilizada cuando sea útil para nosotros poder ayudar o enseñar a otros alrededor de nosotros. De nuevo, Dios, agradecemos por esta bendición y por la doctora Mikaela Dufur y quisiéramos dejar esto en el nombre de Jesucristo. Amén.
Thank you, Kathleen. And now I would also like to turn the time over to Dr. Ashley Larson-Gibby. And Dr. Gibby is an assistant professor in the School of Family Life and will introduce us to Dr. Dufur. And following that introduction, we'll just turn the time right over to you, okay?
Dr. Mikaela Dufur's journey as an academic started well before she entered secondary education. She grew up changing large CO2 tanks and doing other related tasks at her father's 7-Eleven. And at the same 7-Eleven, she read all the comic books that they had there. From this beginning, Dr. Dufur entered the university and majored in English at BYU to get her bachelor's degree in English, likely because of her love of reading from these comic books. She then went on to get her master's and PhD in sociology from the Ohio State University. My grandfather always reminded me that it was the Ohio State University, so we'll make sure to say it like that. During her time as professor here at BYU, she has served meaningful roles at the department, college, and university level. She is currently serving as an associate dean here in the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences. And when asked, she noted that one of her top 3 most proud accomplishments or proudest accomplishments during her career is the wall of artistic and multicultural depictions of Christ that are now hanging in the dean's office. Outside of her BYU service, she has also served the field of sociology well. She has served as a guest editor multiple times, sits on editorial boards, works with national organizations, and in particular, when asked, she said that one of her favorite professional responsibilities has been serving on the National Science Foundation's board, or Build and Broaden panel, which looks to extend research funding and activities to minority-serving institutions. Through all of this, she has been an active scholar, publishing on the sociology of sport, or how sports can both reflect and perpetuate social inequalities, as well as social capital, or how who we know and our social connections can shape our trajectories and our outcomes, something she'll be talking to us about today. Her research is relevant to many, both in academia and out. She has even had her work cited in amicus briefs for Supreme Court cases. Notably, as she does this important work that many care about, she involves students heavily. About 2/3 of her publications have been with students, and since 2013, she has not attended a conference with at least one student author at any academic conference. This shows her persistent and high-quality focus on student mentoring. This commitment to student mentoring has blessed so many, and I'm included in that. I remember being an undergraduate student in Mikaela's class, and I was struck by how funny and bold she was. She was one of very few examples I had at the time of women simply owning their opinions and being really confident in their intelligence. Her influence on me went beyond her confidence and humor, although I do want to note that those did have a very significant impact on me. Research finds that in order for people to pursue a graduate education, they usually need to be told to consider such a thing. And research also finds that this is more so true for women. Women need to be told or suggested to consider graduate school more often than men do, or more times than men need it. Dr. Dufur has done this for me and for so many men and women. When I was an undergraduate student here at BYU and taking courses from Dr. Dufur, she told me that I should apply to PhD programs because who knows, I might get in. During this conversation, it allowed personal revelation to enter my life and became one of the most spiritual experiences I've had, where I really felt like that's what I should do. Her generosity, care, and awareness during that moment and others truly shaped my life. I don't know if I would be here without that. Because of that one moment and that one comment, and on top of that, the training that she gave me, both in understanding research, how to do statistics, and how to write articles, allowed me to have opportunities I wouldn't otherwise have had. Even when I went to graduate school, where many professors then assume that their undergraduate students are no longer in their stewardship or care, Dr. Dufur kept in touch with me in really meaningful ways. She cheered me through many graduate school milestones, and she also invited me into a group that she had formed to help teach students how to do research, both graduate and undergraduate students. And this group also helped junior faculty produce high-quality research about families both in the United States and globally. During this group, I was connected to BYU and was constantly reminded of how much I loved it here and loved the people here. Not only that, but then when I came back to BYU and worked in a different department, so again, not necessarily under her jurisdiction, she took great care of making sure that I still felt cared about by her and that I was counted for. She kept me in this group, which was very generous, but she did even more than that. I will always remember how kind and thoughtful Mikaela Dufur was around the death of my mother. In a situation where and it's very easily to avoid grief, she invited me to lunch, and she asked me many meaningful questions. She wanted to make sure that we were connecting and that she was mourning with me, and that I was able to start my trajectory as a professor as best I could. It is for this and so many other reasons that I felt incredibly honored to be asked to introduce her. I am not exaggerating or stretching or anything of the sort when I say that Dr. Mikaela Dufur has changed my life in deep, meaningful ways that I will always be so grateful for. And it's not just me, which is why I'm so lucky to be the one up here. She's an example, a true example of being a disciple, a scholar, a teacher, a mentor, and an asset to so many communities. With that, I'll now turn the time over to Dr. Mikaela Dufur.
I have instructions to make sure I turn my microphone on, which gives me a minute to recompose myself. Thank you, Ashley. That's far more than I deserve. I have to laugh a little at the bold statement. It's such a kind way for Ashley to say she's overfed, overeducated, and overopinionated. So I'm grateful for it. Forgive me for just a moment for taking out my little piece of paper of all the people I need to thank, thanking, of course, Ashley and Kathleen. Thanking the School of Family Life, Director Holmes, and the Cutler Committee for this opportunity. Great thanks to the Cutler family for all of the amazing support that they have given this school throughout the years, and for loaning us their mom as well. Thanks to Laurel Bishop and Liz Malgrim from the School of Family Life events. They did all the hard work of getting everything put together tonight. And thanks especially to the FHSS Communications and Design team, Jordan Karpowitz, Kathleen Reyes, and especially Victoria Leonenko. If there's anything lovely or good report or praiseworthy that made the slides pretty tonight, Victoria did them. So much applause and thanks to her. Thanks to all the colleagues and collaborators who have worked on this research with me or have just listened to me whine when I get reviews back and helped me through those experiences. Thanks to family and friends joining us tonight, especially those who are able to be here and those on Zoom. And thanks to all of you for coming as well. I appreciate us being able to spend this time together. Before we move into the meat of what we'll talk about tonight, I wanted to make sure we stopped and thought about and recognized Virginia Cutler, for whom this lecture is named. My name does not belong in the same sentence with hers. I hope that you will take this opportunity, even if you do nothing but read her Wikipedia entry, go do that immediately. Leave the lecture and go do that immediately. The tragedies and triumphs that she is such an example of. I've put just one here because we could spend the whole night discussing her. In fact, we should probably do that sometime. But she was the dean of the College of Family Living from 1961 to 1972. That college is one of the progenitors of the college that we are in today, the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences. And my very favorite thing about this, she was working for the University of Utah before this time, and she made Ernest Wilkinson, of Wilkinson Center fame, beg her to come be the dean here. And that sparks joy in me. So she is an amazing woman. I do encourage you to learn more about her. She spent her professional life, devoted her professional life to strengthening families, often in the interest of helping promote child development around the world. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight, too. And we're going to talk about that because it's hard to be a kid. We all complain about adulting. I complain about it constantly. But adults have a lot more choices than kids do. And adults have a lot more latitude to remove themselves from situations that kids do. It's really hard to be a kid for a variety of reasons. And there are a few listed here. Climate factors could be quite literal. I think of the Philadelphia school children who were sent home from school because it was too hot in their schools to be safe. But it can also be climate and environment that's just full of upheaval all around the world. Fast-changing technology that comes straight into our pockets, not even just our home, but into our hands. Things that used to seem really simple and straightforward that it turns out are really complicated and hard to grapple with, can feel like the rug has been pulled out from them somewhat. They lived through a pandemic. They're still living through a pandemic. We talk about COVID kids and how this might be shaping their brains. That's really challenging and really stressful. What I've called here competition culture, what I might call the effects of living in a culture with unfettered late-stage capitalism. Some of you might like capitalism more than I do. But some of the things that adults might choose to do in a capitalist society, we might agree aren't that great for kids to not be able to opt out of. Constantly being in competition, trying to win to get a market share instead of to grow. None of these things are good for kids, which makes it really ironic that what we'll talk about tonight is capital investment in children. I am nothing if not a hypocrite. We're going to talk primarily about social capital tonight, and especially family social capital, but we're going to take a little tour through a couple of other kinds of capital first to give us a little bit of foundation in how to talk about this. So let's start with financial capital, because you're all very familiar with financial capital. Something that you have that you can trade for something you want. That could be an object. If you have a diamond, you could trade it for a house. Or these days, if you have a diamond, you could trade it for a tank of gas, depending both on the size of your diamond and the size of your car. But a thing that you have that you can trade for something else. And in our modern society, we mostly trade symbols. Pieces of paper or bits of metal that have a value printed on them. Or a lot of us these days, just ones and zeros that you tap with a card. But you can trade those for things you want. You're all very familiar with money. And we have a ton of research that demonstrates how financial capital is related to child outcomes. That you need a baseline level of financial capital to be able to thrive, and that additional financial capital generally helps development. Well, scholars thought about that and said, but we know that there are some other things that we trade for things we want. And so they developed this concept of human capital, or things that adhere specifically to you as an individual that you can trade for something you want. Now, a lot of times when we think about human capital, let me see if I can get the little red light to go here. I don't think I can, I'll point. We think of knowledge. Things that you have in your brain that you could trade for something else, or skills. If we're very honest, even though it might depress me, a lot of people come to college to get human capital in the form of knowledge and skills that they can then trade for a better position in the labor market. They can trade for a higher salary or better benefits or a better location. Or if you want to be really cynical, they come to college to get the symbol of having those skills and that knowledge in the form of a degree that they can exchange for a better place in the labor market. But there are other forms of human capital too. Your time. Your time belongs to you. You could have the most boring job in the whole world, guarding a door that no one ever goes in and out of, and you would still be expected to be paid for your time. That's still your time that adheres only to you, that you could trade for something you want. Similarly, your body belongs to you, and you can use your physical labor and trade it for things you want. You could get a job picking up a rock, moving it from point A to point B, putting it down, picking it up again, moving it from point B to point A, putting it down again all day long. But you would still expect to be paid for your labor that's done with your body. If someone is benefiting from your time and your physical labor, your body, and not paying you for it, we have a really, really ugly word for that. And we do not approve of that. Well, again, scholars looked at this and said, great, excellent theoretical innovation, but there are still some other things that we trade for things that we want. And they expanded these ideas of capital to social capital, or something that's generated across people or across networks and actors that you can trade for something you want. And you can see right away that this is a little bit different from financial or from human capital. You could potentially, although I have never been this fortunate, go out into your backyard and dig up a diamond. With it, you could then trade for a house or a tank of gas. You could do 1,000 body weight squats every day, which sounds horrible. But you could do it and get super, super strong and move a rock from point A to point B better than anyone ever has. And you could do those things by yourself. And then find a partner to trade with. But with social capital, you have to generate the capital with other people before you go and trade it. And that's quite different from the other forms of capital that we have here. One phrase that my colleagues and I have used in talking about social capital is that they are resources that inhere in the relationships between and among actors, facilitating a range of social outcomes. Another way you could say facilitating a range of social outcomes is trading it for stuff you want. So very much in this capital tradition. It's important to think of social capital as something you intentionally invest in. Capital that you create with other people on purpose. Now, there are a bunch of theorists who have expanded on our knowledge of social capital and stretched the boundaries of social capital theory. Pierre Bourdieu, Nan Lin, Alejandro Portes. We'll borrow a couple of words from Robert Putnam if you know his famous book, Bowling Alone. But we're going to hang out mostly with James Coleman tonight. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that he was really instrumental in the late 1980s and early 1990s in figuring out how to operationalize, how to build models of social capital that we could test. But he was also a sociologist of education. So he was the only, I would say, among those theorists who really thought deeply about social capital and kids. How would intentional investments in social capital benefit kids' lives? Or allow for children's development? So Coleman outlined both that social capital could be measured, could be thought of, as the actual connections among actors, but also among the things that traveled across those connections. So information, obligations, and norms or expectations were some of the big things he talked about. When I think of little kids and social capital, I think of information with something like parents on the sidelines of a little kid's soccer game, wishing they were anywhere else, and starting to talk to each other and exchanging information about who the best teachers at the school are. That's important information to try to get your kid into the class that's going to suit them best. Thinking of obligations in little kids, I think of things like babysitting or carpooling, having obligations to do things for each other, and that traveling across established connections. Norms or expectations. I'm sure most of us had one of the following phrases growing up. We don't do that in this family. Or in this family, we X. I don't know, is that a positive parenting versus negative parenting kind of setup? But families are ideal places in which to teach norms to children. When we think of families, these tightly knit groups with reciprocal bonds that get repeated over and over, you can see how norms can travel really easily across those. So Coleman's basic proposition was that, I'm going to try my red thing again. See, I thought I saw it. I'm circling the gentleman. You could have the smartest person in the world, the most educated person in the world, the person with the most knowledge and the most skills in the whole world. In other words, the person with the most human capital in the whole world. And that person could not transmit their human capital to a child unless they invested in social capital, across which that information could travel, or across which that human capital could travel. And Coleman argued, and I think he's right, that families are an ideal place to build that social capital. So let's look at a couple of types of social capital and see why families might be ideal for that. How do we build social capital for kids in families? Here's where we come back to our friend Putnam. His famous book, Bowling Alone. Robert Putnam is a political scientist who's spoken here at BYU, actually, who wrote a famous book saying that America is losing its social capital because people don't join bowling leagues anymore. He also had a lot of other data points. It's not just about bowling. But he talked about the ideas of bonding social capital and bridging social capital. Bonding social capital would be really tight-knit groups, close physical proximity, lots of similarities across the actors in the group, and every single person in the group tied together and connected up. And so you can see in families how you could build that kind of capital, bonding and bonding and bonding, through the time that parents invest, through the attention they invest, through monitoring, both to tell people not to do bad things and to encourage them when they do good things. This one, to me, I think, is huge: trust. A couple of years ago, I was primary president, so for my friends zooming in, in charge of Little Kid Church. And kids are hypocrisy monitors. They will sniff it out when you insist on a norm and then break it yourself. So parents, this is where the intentionality comes in. It isn't just about spending time with your kids, it's the intention of building trust, making those specific investments in kids. And then cohesion. Coleman talked a lot about married couples having cohesion, social closure in that way, but also being in the same place at the same time over time and developing that cohesion. Putnam also talked about bridging social capital, which would be bridging to other actors who are outside of that tight-knit group. You can certainly see how parents can do that well. They get connected to teachers, and they can bring information and obligations and norms back home from school and into the family unit. They connect with coaches. They connect with co-congregants at church. They connect with neighbors. One of my favorite examples is back from Coleman again, where parents know their kids, friends, parents, and that closes the square. So creating that social closure. So I want to show you a couple of pictures or a couple of models of what the bonding and the bridging social capital might look like. Let's start with bonding. Again, tight-knit group, physical proximity, lots of similarity, and lots of reciprocity and repeated connections across the actors in the group. Some people call these closed networks because every single actor is tied to every single other actor. Some people, I love this, borrowed from chemistry, call these saturated networks because every connection is made, every electron is taken up. There are no more connections to be made. So let's say we have a focal child, mom, dad, sibling A, sibling B. The focal child's attached to mom and to dad. Mom's attached to sibling A, dad's attached to sibling B, siblings attached to each other, siblings attached to the focal child, dad attached to sibling A. Oh, it's a star in a barn. This is the star in the barn. This is just a really easy way to remember what bonding social capital looks like. It'll keep running through its little model here as we talk. Every single person in the network is connected to every single other person. Now, this really pretty star in a barn has 5 people in it. Some of us have more than 5 people in our family. So you might have to build a bigger barn. You might have a star with more points on it that is more complicated. But overall, you can see the same concept, that every single person in the family is closely tied to every single other person in a family. And you can see that in families, especially with young kids, there's physical proximity. There's repeated interaction, constant repeated interaction, that creates this star in this barn. And you can see why the kinds of resources that Coleman talked about would flow really well. This is a super efficient way to get information to the people in the family, to send norms across these different ties. So bonding social capital is really important for kids. But what about bridging social capital? Some people, as you might guess from what they call the other ones, might call that an open network or an unsaturated network where you don't have all of the ties made. Skip our barn there. So you have a focal child, a mom and a dad, maybe a cousin. And not every connection is made. We have one little closed network over to the left side there, but then a complete outsider. You can see when people have thought about family social capital, thinking that bonding social capital is better. When you think of a kid, you want to have that really saturated reciprocity, lots and lots of people looking at them in the same way all the time. But there can also be value to bridging social capital, especially when it comes to our golden actor here, who will pop up again in a second, as bringing new resources into the system. This person coming from all the way outside the network over there who's bringing new resources. So let's talk about an example of that by looking back at our bonding, again, our star in a barn. When I first moved to Orem to work at BYU, I lived in a neighborhood called Geneva Heights. And it was called that because it was originally built to house the workers at the Geneva steel plant, which is no longer a steel plant, no longer functioning. But at the time, there were a lot of workers who needed housing. So let's imagine each of these actors as a household instead of an individual person. Everyone lives in the same neighborhood, so they have physical proximity and have similarities in that way. Every household in this picture has a parent who works at Geneva Steel Mill, so they get their ties reinforced at work, seeing each other and interacting at work. This is an example in the United States where we organize our schooling geographically, or at least our elementary and secondary schooling geographically, and we did that even more when Geneva Steel was open than we do now. So these kids go to the same schools and see each other every day, and their parents volunteer for the same PTAs and reinforce those norms, or reinforce those ties. This is an example in Utah County. So most of these people belong to the same religious tradition, whose church organizes their congregations geographically. So they all see each other at church too. So you get this wonderful star in a barn in this neighborhood where everybody looks out for everyone else. It's Mayberry. Everybody says, I see you doing something wrong, little kid. I'm going to tell your parents, and reinforces norms. Everyone takes care of everyone else. That sounds great until the parent in family A loses their job at Geneva Steel. In Star in a Barn, closed network, that information's going to travel fast, whether you want it to or not. So everyone's going to know your business. You might feel obligations to each other. Oh, family A is amazing. We can't let them leave the neighborhood. We have to find them a job. What are we going to do? Maybe person E says, I've got it. I just heard of a job opening at Geneva Steel. Oh no, it was your job, person A. They know about jobs at Geneva Steel because of this closed network, this star in a barn. They don't have additional information that can actually help person A. But with the bridging social capital, when we have our golden actor out here bringing new information in, that person can connect to person E, who connects to person B, who connects to person A, and can pass along information about a job that the other people in the network don't know. So even though bonding social capital is really great for kids, bridging social capital is too, all valuable. So now you know some basic theory about what social capital is. You know how we might look at it for kids, time and attention and trust and connections to other adults. You know what it might be shaped like, a star in a barn, or perhaps the Big Dipper for the bridging one with a little candle out to our golden actor. That's all great, does it work? It's probably not much good if it doesn't work. So we're back to Coleman's basic proposition here again, wondering if somebody who has a lot of human capital can transmit it to a child if they have invested in social capital with that child. As you can imagine, since the emphasis is on human capital in this kind of thing, a lot of the research on family social capital in kids has been on academics, or on academic outcomes, on education. So we'll start there. This is the first paper that I ever did looking at family social capital with Toby Parcell. You might recognize her from being our Hinckley speaker a couple of years ago. She was my mentor at the Ohio State University. And she has since been a wonderful collaborator and a dear, dear friend. And so in this paper, we were looking at elementary-aged kids and looking at their math scores in the table on the right and their reading scores in the table on the left. And I should note that these tables went on for 3 more pages. I have not given you all of those pages because nobody cares. But you can see things like married, maternal working hours in both of these, mother spouses working hours, which are about that classic social closure that Coleman talks about. And those don't really work. Those don't make much difference. in these models where we're taking into account how much money your family has and how much human and financial capital your family has. But other measures of social capital do. The home environment variable that you see there on the right-hand table is a composite variable that takes into account a ton, I think 37 questions that ask about parents discussing various things with their kids, parents doing various activities with their kids, parents reading to their kids. My favorite, how warm are you to the child when your child is being a jerk? They did not phrase it jerk, but true. And it turns out that for every chunk of family social capital that you go up, every additional chunk of family social capital that you have, kids score about 6.5 points higher on a math assessment. That's a lot, frankly. For the reading recognition, it was something else about family social capital. The number of children is actually serving as a measure of whether social capital gets diluted over more people. And that did have a negative effect on reading. But looking at mother knowing child's location, mother being connected into that larger network and knowing where your kid was actually had a positive effect on kids' education. Now you might think, well, sure, little kids spend all their time with their families. Little kids are more susceptible to their families. What about adolescents? One of the huge points of adolescence is to become your own person, to individuate. So does social capital actually help promote educational outcomes for adolescents? Let's find out. So this is work with Toby Parcell and Kelly Palfreeman-Troutman, I wish I had a real picture of Kelly. She guards her social media very well. But this actually looks quite a lot like her. For those of you who know her can confirm that. I see John Hoffman confirming it. Here we're looking at, if you look at that middle square there, standardized test scores for high school students. They're math, language, science, and history scores combined. And we took a little bit different measurement approach here. Rather than looking at individual items, we squished them. So you're gonna think that I've lost my mind here. Stick with me for a second. When we look at this whole big conglomeration here, does anybody know what Pando is? I know it's a little divergence from social capital. Pando is the heaviest known living organism in the world. And it's about 3 hours from here. It is a giant tree, but not a giant tree like a redwood. It's a giant tree underneath the ground. They call it a clonal colony. And so it looks like a little forest. But every tree that's sticking up is really just a stem on the one giant tree under the ground. It's a little bit X-Files creepy. It's also a little bit X-Files cool. So mushrooms are the same way. You have the big fungus underground, and each little toadstool that sticks up is an indicator that that fungus is underneath. This is kind of our Pando way of measuring family social capital. There's this idea, this chunk of family social capital underneath, and each of these items is a little toadstool or a little stem sticking up. You can see here that we've got bonding social capital items, discussing things with parents, checking their homework, parental trust. But we also have bridging social capital measures. Parents going to school meetings and events and interacting with adults there. Parents helping out with extracurricular activities, which also is an indicator of school social capital. And it turns out, sure enough, family social capital has a strong positive association with adolescents' test scores, building more evidence that you can transmit human capital to adolescents as well as little kids via social capital. What about even older kids? Sometimes we call those emerging adults. Before 25, before your brain is done cooking. I'll hear students at BYU sometimes say, I can't believe they're making me learn about insurance, I'm still a kid. Fair. So what about kids of that age? You're really kind of an adult now. Does family social capital still help your academic outcomes? So again, Toby Parcell, Professor John Hoffman, who's here with us tonight from our sociology department, Dr. David Brout, who was a master's student here with us and now works at the Huntsman Cancer Center. We were looking at two outcomes here: college enrollment 2 years after your high school class graduates, and college completion or graduation within 8 years after your high school graduation. So about that age of 25, where we might say you're not an emerging adult anymore. After taking into account all kinds of things about you and your family and how you did in high school and what kind of high school you went to and whether you behaved well at that high school, we found that school social capital had an effect on going to college. but those were connections that didn't get refreshed, didn't get replenished. Family social capital had a direct effect on college enrollment, had an indirect effect on college completion through college enrollment, and also had a strong direct effect on college completion. Taken together, family social capital had a stronger association with finishing your college degree than anything else in the model, including how much money your family had or what your grades were in high school. So overall, I think we're putting together a pretty good case that yes, Coleman's right. You can transmit human capital to kids of various ages through social capital. Now again, because he brought this up with education and human capital, tons of the family social capital research is on educational outcomes. What about other stuff? What about how you live? Or what about what kind of job you get someday? We can look at that too. So this is a paper, again, with Toby Parcell and with the late Ben McCune. He was an undergraduate and master's student here and passed away while he was doing his PhD at Penn State, and I miss him. So I'm glad that we could remember him tonight. But looking at behavior problems here, this is a measure that allowed us to stick together what we call internalizing behavior problems, or when kids are shy or clingy, and also externalizing behavior problems, where kids have tantrums and bite. You go, little biter. And these are elementary school age kids. Again. So again, you can see our Pando, our mushroom kind of approach to measuring social capital. And the way we measure behavior problems here was that higher scores where you're doing better in life. So you can see it's a very strong association, again, between family social capital and kids doing better, behaving better. So we're seeing some evidence it's not just about school. Investments, these intentional investments in families and in family social capital can help protect kids against behavior problems. Same question we asked with school. What about adolescents? We might think, okay, maybe for school, but there's so much peer pressure on adolescents. Does family social capital help them stay out of trouble? This is work with Dr. Hoffman again, and this one's kind of fun, I think. So this is looking at, you can see on the vertical axis on the left side there, how much delinquency we expect. And then the horizontal axis down here is how good of a school they went to, school quality. But this is really fun because it's looking at two different kinds of family social capital. It's looking at how you make the social capital, so attachment to parents, and then it's looking at what travels across that attachment, or the norms, high academic values. And so you can see going to good schools is helpful for some kids and protects them from delinquency. But this is really the interesting line. Down here, the one with little circles, the flat one. Kids who have a lot of family social capital in the form of being really attached to those parents, having those connections, and having high academic values stream across those connections, it didn't matter what kind of school they went to. They weren't getting in much trouble anyway, and they weren't getting in much trouble at bad schools, and they weren't getting in much trouble at good schools. So again, starting to put together this case that family social capital is protective against antisocial behavior. I called this a health behavior, but you might think of it as delinquency. This is work with Toby and Ben again, same old Pando kind of model, our mushroom model, predicting marijuana use in the last 12 months. And similarly, family social capital was strongly associated with not using marijuana in the last 12 months. We found very similar patterns for alcohol in the last 12 months, and then how much marijuana or alcohol kids who had used it had used in the last 12 months. So again, either, depending on how you look at it, a protective effect against delinquency or promoting pro-social behavior, avoiding drugs. This is a little bit different take. We wanted to look at something completely different from academics and behavior, and we wanted to look at that emerging adulthood group again. So this is work with Tom Lepard, who was an undergraduate student here and now is working on his PhD at NC State, and Brianna Moody, who I will thank in advance for saying the closing prayer tonight, who's an undergraduate in sociology here. And we wanted to look at how family social capital might be related to how adolescents create their career goals, and then whether they're able to achieve those career goals in their adulthood, whether they're able to get a job match that achieves that career goal. So this is the first piece of this. This is hot off the presses, by which I mean not that it just got published, it just came out of R, like this week. So what we're doing here first is predicting how much social capital the kids might have. So panel A is how much total social capital we would predict after taking into account a bunch of different variables. Panel B is how much investment from their dad they're getting in terms of social resources, and panel C is how much investment they're getting from their moms. The left-hand bars or the blue bars are girls. The right-hand bars or the orange bars are boys. There is a statistically significant difference between these, but you'll notice that they're pretty close together. So there aren't big real-world differences. But we are intrigued particularly by B, panel B, up in the upper right-hand corner, where we see that boys get more social capital, more investment socially from their dads than girls do. Now that's particularly interesting when you know the rest of the story, which is when we turn around and use this social capital to predict creating career goals and then achieving those career goals, these investments in social capital from moms are more powerful in predicting the goal making. But the social capital from dads is more powerful in predicting the goal match, achieving your goal. So kind of some exciting stuff. Come tell me afterwards why you think that is, because we're trying to write the conclusion to this paper right now. One of the important things this kind of finding brings up is that if we're going to buy into this capital investment and encourage people to do it, we need to know if it works for everybody. And if it works the same way for everybody. Does everyone build social capital in the same way? Does everybody have access to the same amount of social capital? Not those girls from their dad on the last slide. Does everyone get the same return to their investment? We're literally using investment language here. Does every person get the same return to their investment? We've largely stayed in the United States with these data so far, so I want to take us on a little tour. We'll start again in the United States and then end again in the United States with an example I think you'll be very familiar with, but go around the world. So Christina Cross, here in the middle first of all, is a sociologist at Harvard who's recently published research showing that the social closure kinds of social capital variables that Coleman talks about don't work the same way for Black kids as they do for kids in other groups. So we might need to expand who is family when we start measuring what social capital is. This table that you see here is Dr. Melissa Alcaraz from the sociology department and Dr. Gibby, who you heard from earlier, who looked at kids in South India, so on our world tour now. And they looked at kids who had resident parents or non-resident parents. Non-resident parents tend to be parents who go from rural areas to urban areas for work, or who go from urban area to urban area for work. And they found that kids in those kinds of families were building more social capital with their siblings, which is something we don't know very much about. And especially the one statistically significant difference was in educational activities. Here we are back to Coleman's basic proposition again, but how kids in different family types might use their siblings for that. Xiaobing Wu, third from the left there, looked at kids who go to school in Hong Kong and looked at whether they identified as Hong Kongers. And you might think, well, that will depend. Were they born in Hong Kong? Do they travel to Hong Kong every day from mainland China for school? It actually depended on less on that and more on the norms that their parents sent to them across these social capital kinds of connections to inculcate in them the norm of who they were, which is kind of interesting. Dr. Alireza Betoui, right in the middle there, looked at Swedish kids and found 3 different groups looking at their school experiences. There were rich kids in rich neighborhoods who had rich parents who might have enough human capital and financial capital to invest a ton of social capital. And they reached out, made lots of connections with schools, and created a great experience for their kids at school. He found poor kids in poor neighborhoods whose parents didn't have that social capital, and the kids did not have a good experience at school. Then he found poor kids in poor neighborhoods who were refugees, and found that they had a ton of what we've been calling family social capital because the teachers reached out to parents and created those ties back to parents, but that put all the capital in the home again. So it was really important to look at the source of how the capital was being built. Spencer James from our own School of Family Life and his student, Mikkel Jorgensen-Wells, looked at sexual onset in South Africa and found that family social capital was protective. It delayed sexual onset for some ethnic groups in South Africa and not for others. Why? We don't know yet. One more example of how family social capital might operate differently for other people. The 2 guys down there on the end. Some of you know at least one of them, Doug Downey, who's in our own Department of Sociology, or excuse me, Ben Gibbs, who's in our own Department of Sociology. I wish Doug was here. And Doug Downey at the Ohio State University. Doug and Ben and I make a little star in our barn. Doug was my master's thesis advisor. He was Ben's doctoral advisor. So we're a little academic family tree. Doug has been super influential in a lot of ways. But one of the things he's been super influential in is trying to untangle why kids with more siblings, why kids from larger families do worse in school on average. We see this across all kinds of data sets, same pattern over and over. If you're from a large family, stick with me, it's gonna be worth it. So there were some really crazy theories about why this pattern existed. My favorite crazy theory, and by favorite I mean what is wrong with you, was that babies are dumb. So every time a family adds a baby, their collective IQ goes down. I'm not kidding you, this is a real theory. I don't subscribe to that point of view. Doug did better. Doug said, that's ridiculous. What's a real theory? What's really going on here? And he's done a lot of research showing that it's resource dilution. That could be physical resources that have to be shared across more kids in a family, or it could be social resources like social capital. So we see this pattern over and over and over again. And yet, across the years, I've gotten many phone calls from Doug, I suspect Ben has, that went like this: ring, ring, what is it with the Mormons? Because it turns out that's the one group the pattern doesn't hold for. It's not that Mormons do better in school with larger families, it just doesn't matter. And so Doug has proposed a few different theories over the year. One was, well, Mormons care about family. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints care about family. Truth. One of my favorites was when he called and said, I've got it. I've been reading a talk by your Mr. Hinckley. And I was so touched. And he says that you value education. I'm like, well, yeah, but I think some other groups do too. You know what my theory is? What are we talking about tonight? Social capital. Every family in the LDS Church has people assigned to them to look out for them and take care of them, to be their friend, honestly. Every adolescent who's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has multiple adults assigned to them, not only to look after their spiritual growth or monitor them, but to help them learn to set goals and gain skills. Every little kid who's a member of the church has multiple adults assigned to them to help them learn norms that are part of positive development. I think maybe there's more social capital to go around. And so maybe there's dilution, but there's just so much more of it. I think we have them persuaded. I won't give away Ben and Doug's demography paper. I'll let Ben talk about that in his Cutler Lecture someday. But they found some original patterns that suggest that this might be. All right, let's see if we can get this to work. You've heard some about social capital theory, what it looks like, how it's connected in so many good ways to academic outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. What do you want to know next? So if you could use this QR code, it should, God willing, take you to a website where you can enter what do you think social capital is connected to. I'm getting a nod, yes, excellent. What do you think social capital is connected to? What should we look at next? We'll make a little word cloud, I hope, and see what we should look at next. Is everybody use the QR code? Oh, one more person. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. Let's see. Aha, it works. The presentation has results. What should we look at next? Social capital, good. Mental health, I completely agree. We know almost nothing about how family social capital might be connected with mental health. You'll see an example at the end of the presentation. Friends, yes. How does family social capital interact with peer social capital? We don't know very much. Spirituality, we know nothing. We sometimes look at how connections to co-congregants might be social capital, but how it affects spirituality, we know nothing. I hope some of you will come and do some of this research with me. I was going to just steal all your good ideas, but come and do the work with me. Instead, values, same kind of thing. Relationship formation, we could do that tomorrow with data that we have. We don't know how your family social capital extends into your future with things like family formation. Lifetime earnings, same thing. Economic mobility, yeah, we know nothing. All of this work still left to do that could help us understand this. All right, luckily I get to save this forever, but come knock on my door and let's do some of this. All right, I think I probably am supposed to share the screen again, so let me get to our, there it is. Okay. Other things we need to investigate. We know essentially nothing about online technology and how that has changed how we build social capital. Think of that in terms of parenting practices, thank you, parenting practices and policymaking. What if we find that parents should never give their child a cell phone because it prevents them from building family social capital in their home? It prevents them from doing that bonding. And we should tell parents that. What if we find the opposite? What if we find that cell phones are hugely instrumental in keeping adolescents connected to their parents as they send texts back and forth, or as they do the Discord, or whatever you young people do, I don't know. In that case, we should tell families to give their kids phones. We should ask policymakers to subsidize cell phones for every child, a cell phone in every pot. We just don't know. Oh, I've broken this somehow. There we go. What even is bonding social capital and bridging social capital? Those are really fun theoretical ideas, but we don't actually know a ton about what they look like. We make up words like close physical proximity. But looking at Christina Cross again, the sociologist at Harvard who said, doesn't look like that for black kids, we should be looking to communities of color who build families in bigger ways. What about your aunts? What about your grandparents? What about your cousins? And how you build social capital with them? We know almost nothing about that. What about a co-residential grandparent? Are they someone who's intentionally investing in a child's social capital, or are they diluting social capital more? We don't know yet. Let me give you a quick example, I know we're running out of time, about how we don't know what's bonding social capital and what's bridging. We have a couple of people I'm lucky to have joining us via Zoom tonight who are my constructed family. We travel together, so we have exchanged norms about how to travel and what a decent traveler looks like. We've exchanged obligations. We've taken care of each other in hard times. We are planning to retire together. I am not kidding. We are buying property, possibly in Scotland, and retiring together. Now, that's an obligation to take care of each other in our old age. We may be having joint custody of a mini cow. That is still under negotiation. I'm skeptical on the mini cow front. So you might describe all of that as bonding social capital. Lots of reciprocity. These ties are very repeated. But we met, with one exception, this group met 21 years ago this month on an internet message board for the television show The West Wing. No lie, that is 100% true. I think Putnam would say that's not bonding social capital. We've never lived anywhere near each other. Delaware, Texas, Utah, Virginia. We come from very, very, very different backgrounds, very different faith traditions. Is that bonding or bridging social capital? Do we have to wait until we live together for it? We don't know. We know very little about this. Is there such a thing as negative social capital? I know from sad experience you can have negative financial capital. You can have less than zero money. Can you have less than zero human capital? I don't know. If you believe a fact that isn't true, I don't know, actually. Can you have negative social capital? I asked someone this the other day, and they said, well, what if you get divorced and all of your friends hate you? I don't know if that's negative social capital, but think about gang members. Could you have very, very strong social ties that are social capital, but you can't trade that social capital anywhere but in the gang? Would that qualify as negative social capital? So here I think is an interesting way to look at this question. This is research with Dr. Shauna Pribish, who is at Old Dominion University. Although she is a co-conspirator behind the mini cow, we actually met in graduate school. And John Jarvis, who's here tonight from our Department of Sociology. This is looking at adolescence in South Korea, which is a very, very high academic stress context. There's a super high stakes college entrance exam that kind of defines your whole life after that. It's super stressful. Families spend a ton of money on shadow education or more school outside of school to prep for this, and these kids are stressed. So the outcome we're looking at here is academic stress. And based on everything else we've seen tonight, family social capital should protect kids from this academic stress. And sometimes it does. If you look at my parents and I understand each other well, positive sign, or negative signs, and little stars, that protects kids against academic stress. My parents and I candidly talk about everything, including the fact that I'm gonna fail this college entrance exam and ruin my life. That actually protects kids against academic stress. I frequently talk to parents about my thoughts and experiences. It's associated with higher academic stress. Yikes. Now this is cross-sectional data. It could be a super stressed kid coming to talk to their parents, I hope so. But there's a really strong possibility here that these strong bonding, tons of reciprocity in these bonds across parent and child, the parents are sending expectations of success, norms of success across these bonds and stressing their kids out. Does that count as negative social capital? All right, so what should you do? I hope that you'll all want to come and do a lot of this research. Come seek me out and let's work on this. But what are some practical things you can take away today as well? One of them is to build your barn. Your star in your barn. If you think about your family, how can you either invest in or get returns to social capital? A lot of you here tonight are still in that emerging adulthood age. How can you strengthen your ties to the people in your family of origin so that you can benefit from the investments they're still trying to make in you? Some of you have younger siblings. How can you invest in them? Some of you want to build a bigger barn. I have nibblings in town, nieces and nephews, and my brother has done a great job of this. He goes every week and plays a D&D campaign with them. He's building social capital with them. It's not my thing, but information gets back through these things, and their aunt is going to their house to check on their smoke detectors this week because she is concerned. That's information that travels across these things. Build your barn. Demographic trends show that most of us in this room either have had or will have kids. Not all of us, but most of us. What will you do to intentionally invest in this social capital with your kids? Be the handle of the Big Dipper, that constellation that looks more like bridging social capital. Be that neighbor who knows all the kids' names. Be that person at church who goes up to a parent and says, I think your kids are awesome, especially because they threw crayons at each other during church, which I think is more entertaining. Be that friend who says to kids, not are you going to college, but where are you going to college? Sending the norms that they're definitely going to go to college. I want to close us out tonight with a last couple of thoughts, one story with two examples of being the handle of the Big Dipper, building, bridging social capital. So you may have heard of the Black 14. These two men who are members of the Black 14 were recently here on campus. But just a quick overview in case you don't know them. They were the black members of the 1969 University of Wyoming football team, which shockingly was good. Who knew that Wyoming once had good football? And as they were getting ready to play BYU, members of the Black Student Union came to them and said, do you know BYU? Do you know what the deal is there? Because this was still a time, 1969, when BYU's sponsoring church did not allow black men to hold the priesthood, which then, of course, had ramifications for how people could marry in the temple as well. So they thought deeply about this and said, we'd like to do something. We'd like to say something. So we would like to wear black armbands while we play BYU. But we're going to go talk to our coach about it, and if he says no, we won't do it. So they went to go talk to their coach, who had gotten wind of it, and before they could even say a word, he threw them off the team. So imagine that, those of you who are in college now, your scholarship's gone, your housing's gone, your future that you imagined is gone. It makes my stomach turn over just to think about all of that. 50 years down the road, they got back together with their bonds, and they started a program to donate food to the food banks in their communities. And they now, this is part of why they were here at BYU, have a partnership with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and have donated tons of food to these food banks. Well, how did that happen? Mel Hamilton, who's the gentleman on the left in the hat, had a son named Malik. Malik joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, much to Mel's surprise. Malik came to BYU and was mentored by Margaret Blair Young, who's been instrumental in amplifying the voices of Black LDS folk. Margaret Blair Young went to school with Gifford Nielsen, who we now call Elder Gifford Nielsen of the Quorum of the 70. Link, 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 handle of Big Dipper. When Mel and Gifford Nielsen got together, Elder Nielsen said, well, what can we do to help? Mel said, we've got this great plan for food banks. And Elder Nielsen said, wait, I know who has food. We do. And the next thing you know, tons of food literally being delivered to these food banks. Build these bridges. The other thing Mel Hamilton said when he was here, though, is an invitation to all of us. He has spent his life working with at-risk kids. Maybe not quite the same avenue Virginia Cutler did, but thinking about kids and how to help them thrive. And he said, when I told my kids I work with, that I was coming here to BYU, I asked them what they know about you, and they said they're elitist. They've got all kinds of privilege and they don't even know it. They would never talk to someone like me. And he said to us, I know that's not true about you. Show them. Reach out to them. Reach out a hand to them. He said, just take one poor child under your wing. He is actually describing to us another test of Coleman's basic proposition. If you have an expectation, a norm in your heart of being obliged to each other, of loving your neighbor, you can't transmit that to a child unless you invest in social capital with them. So build those bridges. Take up Mel Hamilton's invitation and realize that this is holy work. This is our last thought. I know I've kept you forever. My apologies to my friends who might have joined us via Zoom who are from different faith perspectives or traditions. Some of these words aren't going to make sense for the next couple minutes, but we talk about these things at BYU. This is holy work. If you think of reaching out to the children Mel Hamilton was talking about, that's part of building the beloved community of Zion, as Martin Luther King Jr. would say. That is holy work. Reaching out to a child to facilitate their growth, their development, that is holy work. Doing things to strengthen families, that's what we're talking about with these ties in families. Doing things to strengthen families is holy work. We do this kind of holy work in our temples when we think of sealing ordinances. We seal together stars and barns, individual families, and we reach out up ancestry and across ancestry and link together through bridges all of these stars and barns until we build together the whole family of God. That is holy work. This may seem like a light-minded version of that. Thank you to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is Guardians of the Galaxy. This is the Nova Corps. So each of these soldiers has their own little cool fighter pilot plane thing here that looks like a star. But when they're really powerful, they come and hook together and make a huge net that protects their whole planet. We link together families like this. We link together stars and barns like this. This is gathering scattered Israel. And this is holy work. So if you take nothing else from tonight, you don't have to remember how Coleman outlined social capital, but remember that building this social capital and building it especially for children and families is holy work. Thanks for spending this time with me tonight. If you're a student, don't forget your X points.
Yes, don't forget your experience points. But before Dr. Dufur sits down, I just want to award her with this lovely plaque in honor of this Virginia Cutler Lecture today.
Thanks. Is someone taking a picture?
I don't
I'm
know
posing
if
like.
there's a picture.
Oh, no,
We'll
thank
pretend.
you so much. Thank you again to the school and to the Cutlers.
And now it's my pleasure to announce who next year's Virginia Cutler Lecturer will be. That will be Dr. Chris Porter from the School of Family Life. So congratulations, Chris.
Hey.
We look forward to learning from you. And I just want to give one more special thanks to Laurel and Liz Malmgren, who helped organize things for us tonight. And of course, special thanks to the Cutler family and the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences. We're going to turn the time over now to Brianna Moody to give our closing prayer, and then I hope all of you will join us out in the foyer for a nice reception. So Brianna?
Heavenly Father, we thank thee so much for allowing us to come and to be here tonight and to learn about this holy work of building social capital and being able to help the children in our lives, whether those be in our communities or our own children or those that we know or will yet get to know. We thank thee so much for the gift of being able to learn, being able to research, and being able to do thy work in so many different ways. We're so grateful for Dr. Dufur and all that she has contributed with her research, her passion, her energy, and all the good work that she has brought forth for this university and for the world. And we ask you to please bless us as we all seek out thy will and seek how we might assist in this work. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.